there was this fella just taking Polaroid shots of everything, and he looked a little ragtag, and he said, "Hey, do you need a little bit of help?" I said, "Sure thing." And so he helped me set up my drum set, and he was basically my roadie, getting my equipment set up. And as I was sitting, getting ready to pull my van away from the stage, Michael Chavez, who's now John Mayer's musical director, came up to me and he said, "So what did Daniel want?" I said, "Daniel who?" He's like, "Daniel Lenoir, the guy you're talking to." And I said, "Oh, you mean the guy that I had set up my drum set?"
Come on.
Yeah, so that's how naive I was. I didn't even know who anyone was. But I'll tell you, he spent the whole tour with me because I was the only guy that treated him like a normal person. And
Bootstrapped Unicorns, the podcast is back. This is our first interview episode, and I can't believe the conversation I just had with my friend Rob Kurzreiter, and you're about to hear it. Rob is, he feels like a really old friend. You ever have that person in your life that you've known for like 5, 6, 7 years, but you feel like you've known that person for 30? And he's probably got that with 100,000 people out there, but he's just one of those personalities where you know, like, and trust him pretty fast. But this dude is really different. I don't know too many realtors of any type, but especially highly successful realtors like Rob is, who once was a touring musician, a studio musician, and a blue man. I mean, yeah, if you don't know what a blue man is, go Google it real quick and come back. But painted blue and a percussionist, he was a blue man. But he's going to tell us all about some of his past and the success he had in his previous music career, and kind of unpack what it means to be a success in that world. And then, and I'll be honest, I've had this fascination for years, but Rob doesn't talk a lot about old Rob and the old musical Rob. He's really focused on the now and the future. And so he just doesn't dwell on that. But I've always wanted to know, like, what success formula or theorem exists from the music world that was transportable into today as a realtor? Because I don't know too many people who've landed 1% level success in a world where they're like, you know what, I'm done with that. And then they went and landed 1% level success in a different world. That just almost doesn't compute. It doesn't happen. And it's deliberate. And there's something to it. And that's what you're about to learn about on this episode of Bootstrapped Unicorns. This is episode 4, our first interview with Rob Kurzreiter. He is the blue man who sold your house. So, Rob, you're one of those people I don't get a chance to see enough. I feel like we should hang out like 3 times a week, but it's more like 1 or 2 times a month. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Josh?
I'm good. So,
very kind of you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a long list of favorite people, and on that long list of favorite people is your name. And I can't tell you where you are on that. That's a proprietary and private thing. But my wife is at the top of that list, just so you know.
Okay.
So I was thinking about the other day how we even know each other. And when I moved to Orlando 8 or so years ago, I know I found myself kind of on tour, as it were, and doing a documentary series. And when that was over, I landed home here in Orlando, and I didn't know anybody. And then I stumbled onto a BNI group, and you started it.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so that was fun. And so tell me a little bit about
the day you walked in, actually.
Hold on, tell that story.
I think your jacket is actually still hanging over there.
Is that what you remember? The blinding experience? Yeah. So what was that first impression?
I thought, this is somebody that has a story to tell.
Okay. That's a kind first impression. I'll take that.
You mean the BNI getting the chapter started, that experience?
Oh, no. Well, no, actually, I was just curious. Like, I was waiting for I don't want to talk to that guy at all. But so when I joined BNI, I knew you instantly as the realtor in the group. Mm-hmm. And, we get to know each other over time. And there's so many realtors. What is it, like 63,000 realtors in Central Florida? And so there's a lot of them. There's varying degrees of success. It seems like, and I really want our audience to know a little bit about you before we go, reverse, because I think the reverse is going to help us get to some semblance of your philosophy of success.
Sure.
But so I met you probably, 5 or 6 years into your real estate journey?
Yeah, probably about 5 or 6.
All right.
Yeah.
So what was life like then? How was real estate for you? Why was BNI even necessary?
Right. Well, I had worked for, it was about 6 years with my sphere of influence and my community. And I realized that I didn't really have a lot of business-to-business relationships. And I'd ask a few people about, how should I grow my business? How does it become sustainable in a market? I love what I do. I want to continue to do it. And I remember my dad telling me when I was a kid, he used to always tell my older brother, he said, if you want a sustainable business, you need business-to-business relationships, not just friends, family, and community. And so that was the biggest thing for me. I thought, where can I find good business-to-business relationships? How can I meet people of like mine with the same aspirations and goals? So I looked into a few different groups. I looked into, the Rotaries, the Chamber of Commerce, all of those types of groups. And I stumbled upon BNI. I'd never heard of it. And that actually was speaking to a mutual friend, Barry Botwin, and John Tankersley. And so Barry took me around. We looked at a bunch of different chapters. We visited a chapter for a meeting. And then we got together with John, and he said, well, why don't you just start your own BNI chapter? Because BNI chapters are only as good as the people in them. And every BNI chapter has its own culture. And I think we could get our own BNI chapter started with our own culture. And as soon as he said we, and it was me, John, and Barry, I was in. So
that's cool. All right.
So the three of us really put our efforts together. And
so you like that partnership aspect. Is that because it was comfortable starting something that felt like a heavy lift and you would have partners in that? Or is partnership part of how you live? Like that seems so comfortable on your face right there.
Right. Well, I think it's always easier if someone else has already done it. And both of them had. But the truth of it is you're hitting on a really interesting point, because although I succeeded at real estate and business probably faster and more so than I had expected in the first few years, I was surprised by how much time I spent by myself. And that was something I had never done. I'd always worked in group settings. I'd always been a team player. And even though I'd already had a full-time assistant and I'd been working with agents that work with me, I still spent a lot of time alone. So as soon as I started attending groups like that, and especially BNI, I really enjoyed that environment a lot. I felt really comfortable in it. It was really familiar.
So you're going to take me in a direction right now that I wasn't even planning on going in yet. It was definitely part of the plan. But so you were used to working in groups. Why don't you give me a little bit of a picture of what type of groups were you working in prior to the real estate life?
So my previous career was as a musician, as a drummer. And I started very young in Canada. I was a studio musician and a touring musician. And when I was married, in 2000, my wife Joyce and I moved to Los Angeles, and I became a touring and studio musician in Los Angeles. And at that time, I played on about over 70 records, film scores, jingles, commercials, soundtracks, that type of thing. And probably the biggest band that I was involved in was One Republic at that time. So I was the first drummer that they had when they came to Los Angeles after the original drummer was let go, and I started recording the first record with them. So that was my rock and roll background. But really what took me to Orlando was Blue Man Group. So I came to Orlando in 2006 as a member of Blue Man Group. And
now, hold on. So as a member of Blue Man Group, and I'm aware, I've seen the show, there's some blue men, and then there's some supporting men
and
women. who are also musicians, keeping the vibe going through the whole show and stuff. Were you blue?
So it's a great question. So I was blue. Initially, I was blue because...
Okay, I'm in the presence of royalty. Can we just take a moment of silence and imagine Rob blue right now? And just so happens we have blue paint in the back. Miller, could you go grab the blue paint? No, I'm kidding. So you were really blue man. I
started as a blue man. I trained into the blue man role. What was interesting is, so when I worked with One Republic, the interesting thing about that part of my music career is that I hadn't been a band member for a long time. I was a sideman. I was a paid studio musician or touring musician. But our singer Ryan Tedder was writing with so many different artists very early on that we worked a lot as a band, and we became a band through various different reasons for that. So at one point I was in that band and I was waiting for a record release and everything that had to be done, all the promotion and marketing and touring that was to come. But I was in limbo. I was in between, and I was not doing other studio work, again, for other reasons that were related to that relationship. So I was at a breakfast brunch with an old artist that I was working on, and there was a lady there that was a casting director for Blue Man Group. She said, "You should come out and audition for the show." And I thought, well, I do have a year probably here where I could use a little bit of money and a little bit of income, but I really could not play as a musician at that time. And she said, "Well, it's okay because it's an acting role." So I went up to Las Vegas, and I thought, they just I thought it was a musician role, but because you wore glow-in-the-dark paint, they considered an acting role. And I realized as soon as I got to the audition, I was actually auditioning for the Blue Man role. And I ended up getting hired into training. So
now, what does Blue Man training boot camp look like? Is it a whole bunch of people painted blue, like running obstacle courses with weird instruments and playing music? Like, what does that look like? It's a process that really begins with teaching the performer the show, and then really just learning the Blue Man character and trying to. It's almost like a acting workshop. I would say it's more like a workshop training where they try to. You're really in the first little while. You're really your training is really part of the second part of the audition. You get hired into training, and you try to find that bold-faced innocence in you and train you as a character. And they really don't know if you're going to be a blue man until you're actually in shows being a blue man. And the training is really part of that audition. So it's very personal. It's in New York City. I mean, they would put, there's stories of taking people that would have a hard time with self-consciousness and putting a clown nose on them and making them ride the subway all day and things like that. So, and watching animals in the park, watching how dogs interact without speaking. But I was never an actor. I found it very difficult. So I was very relieved, fast forwarding through this story, to not go on as a blue man and get hired into the company as a drum set player. I found out very quickly that that's where everything happened. That's where the music direction happened. That's how you furthered yourself in the company. And that's where everyone that spoke my language was, in the music department. So that makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, just for my own personal enjoyment, I just want clarification. You actually were on stage in blue for at least one show.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's just super fun. It really is.
Yeah.
So, one of the things, and I kind of want you to name drop a little bit more if you don't mind, because I think that's fun. I mean, One Republic, Blue Man. Are there any jingles or film scores or anything where you're like, oh yeah, that was pretty cool too? Any of those fun things?
Yeah, when I first moved to Los Angeles, I played on a record for a band called 40 Foot Echo, and then ended up touring with that band. And we had our single was actually the main song from the Freaky Friday movie with Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan. And
that's fun.
It's really interesting when you live in Los Angeles, and I've been in Los Angeles over the years, over 15 years, on and off many times. Every time I'd work on a record, but I was Canadian, I always had to come back. And but those artists, and with no disrespect to any of those artists, they just seem like people in a cable TV show, local cable TV show. Access Hollywood. It used to, and Entertainment Tonight. I used to think it was really funny that everyone found that so interesting, because these are people that were just out and they were in our social circle. So, but that was interesting.
Yeah,
that was a great group of people, and I think another highlight was working with Deborah Faulkner, and we would tour with. She was Deborah. Deborah was Robert Downey Jr.'s wife at the time, and we would tour with different artists and do benefit concerts, and we'd tour with Sting and Elton John and Daniel Lanois, and I just learned so much.
Wait, you toured with Elton John?
I played with Deborah, and we would do the shows with them.
Yeah, it's on the same property, probably running into each other in the back, hallway.
I'll tell you a funny story about my experience in being very naive and not knowing who anybody was. I had a Volkswagen van. I'd always get, these were outdoor shows, I'd always get to the concert early. I didn't have my own roadie. I had my own equipment because I was going from artist to artist in that time when you're in Los Angeles and you're not touring, you're playing with everyone and anyone just to pay your bills. And I pulled up to the stage, and there was this fella just taking Polaroid shots of everything, and he looked a little ragtag, and he said, "Hey, do you need a little bit of help?" I said, "Sure thing." And so he helped me set up my drum set, and he was basically my roadie, getting my equipment set up. And as I was sitting getting ready to pull my van away from the stage, Michael Chavez, who's now John Mayer's musical director, came up to me and he said, "So what did Daniel want?" I said, "Daniel who?" He's like, "Daniel Lanois, the guy you're talking to." And I said, "Oh, you mean the guy that I had set up my drum set?"
Come on.
Yeah, so that's how naive I was. I didn't even know who anyone was. But I'll tell you, he spent the whole tour with me because I was the only guy that treated him like a normal person. And
oh, that's interesting. I mean, you do forget sometimes that celebrities they started as normal people and probably fancy themselves still normal people.
Yeah.
That's it.
They're all normal people.
Yeah, kind of, right? I've been on enough movie sets now to realize that, anybody I run into, the only ones that nobody wants to be around are the ones who know they're celebrities. And then the ones who are the best celebrities, and there's so many of them, are just wonderful, warm people who really wish nobody saw them as a celebrity.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, you're this... I'll say the term because I don't think you ever would, knowing how humble you are. You're a world-class drummer, playing with some of the biggest names in the world, staying you, which is exactly how I know you to be, which is awesome. But at one point in life, you were somebody who had never held a drumstick, and then you picked up the drumstick, the drums. So I'm sure I want to kind of start there. But is there a story to growing into being a drummer who's worthy of playing on some of these albums and playing in some of these bands? And so what does that trajectory look like? How did you pull that off?
So I really love music. And I could play a number of different instruments. I don't really think that I ever became proficient at one instrument until I played drums for many years. But the reason I chose drums is because that was really my vehicle to be part of music and the music industry. It was, I had played a lot of different instruments with a lot of different groups, and in one particular environment, which was really the group of people that I wanted to be with, they really needed a drum set player, and I was filling in and playing bass in that band. And I just thought, we've been looking for the right person for this band to play drum set for years, or actually really it was months. And I thought...
Months can feel like years.
Yeah, I can do this. Why don't I play this position? And I have somebody that would fit in great, that could play, and then we'll have the right people. And if we have the right people, then we're already, leagues ahead of everybody else that we're playing with. And And I came, I was Canadian. I played hockey all my life. So I've always been in teams. I've always been a team player. If you played defense, you're still playing hockey. As long as and it was funny. I used to use that analogy a lot of times when we'd have a bass player that would play too much. I'd say, "Hey, you're in the band, but play your position." So, and that was it was my position in the music industry. And I was happy to be a part of it and with the people I wanted to be around. But to me, it didn't really matter a whole lot that I was the drummer or I was the guitar player or I was the bass player. Years later in life, that became my identity, and I became very passionate about that instrument and just had a lot of time invested.
It's interesting, I consider that kind of an actionable lesson that, you took a moment and said, our band doesn't have the resources we need if we keep imagining ourselves as the players that we're currently playing. If you had said, no, I'm the bassist, who knows how long it would have taken to find the drummer.
Right.
But the fact that you're like, I do have drumming skills. I can be a percussionist for this group, and I'm not married to bass. So therefore, I will take one for the team if that analogy works. You're still part of the team. You're forwarding the vision. You're just playing a slightly different position. Still rhythm, and you knew how to fill the other role. So that, in that moment at the very least, kept your career and your experience in music moving forward.
Right.
But you could have been stalled for who knows how long. There's no way to know if you didn't take that lateral move in order to free up the opportunity. And, and this whole Bootstrapped Unicorn podcast concept, it's one of my passions for me is unlocking, this clarity of what it means to find your way to success. And success is different for everybody. And I consider you so highly successful in so many of the things that you've done. I've always wanted to have this conversation. But even as a kid, how old were you when you were saying, no, I'll be the drummer? 17. That's kind of a really humble and bold move at the same time for a 17-year-old to go, no, we need a drummer. I'm going to be the drummer.
Right.
Were you always wired that way, or was that like a revelation?
I was always the problem solver and the peacekeeper. Whenever there was conflict, whether it was in my family, with my siblings, or, that is a industry riddled with conflict and ego.
Is it?
And
I watch movies. I don't live in the music industry. I live in the movie industry, and we have our own issues. But so is that's really a thing?
I think that if you go into an industry like that, and really in hindsight, almost any profession, and you can be an encouraging, unifying force, an uplifting energy, and you can be a pleasure to be around, you're going to go pretty far if you just don't get in your own way. And, obviously you have to bring value to the table and there has to be a benefit. But that was a lot of it for me with that situation, and many since then in my career. I have often found it easier to know what not to do, not necessarily what to do. And in that situation,
All right.
I didn't really play drum set that well, but I'd been playing bass with so many players that did not work in that group that I knew exactly what I didn't want them to do. So I just went over there and didn't do any of those things, and got the right person to fill my position. That worked fine, and I slowly learned the things that I needed to do.
Okay, and was that just a slow road to that level of accomplishment to be able to become that sought after studio musician? Because I'm hearing, I'm pretty good at drums. I think I can hit the skins a couple of times. It almost sounds amateurish, even though I'm sure you weren't.
Right.
In comparison to the future it sounds like at 17 you weren't ready to be on a studio album as a drummer. So what is that? Is it just discipline and time in? Is there some key to going from, that level of accomplishment as a 17-year-old who can do what needs to be done to however old you are and One Republic says you're my guy? What's that difference?
Yeah, boy, that's a tough one to figure out, to really know what that is. But I think one of the most important things with anything that you do, especially in music, is you need some time. You need to spend it, especially certain positions. I think the same's true for hockey. The same's true for business. It's universal. But if you're not putting yourself in a position where you're actually around people that you're learning from, you just have to be at least doing it. So that was the big thing with that decision, was that I knew that if we did that, we could all just get on with learning what we needed to learn at a young age. We could get out there, we could start playing, we could start meeting the people we needed to. And so it was a combination of that, and really just and I think this is true again for any industry, or if you're involved in it for the larger cause. If you're playing hockey because you love the game, not because you love being a left winger, or if you love music because you love music and not just because you're the drummer, the bass player, if you see it from that perspective, then you're immediately aligning yourself with everybody else that loves music, that loves hockey, and then you're doing something that it elicits some type of emotion or feeling that is positive. And I think that's important. And I think one of the things for me as a studio musician is I always heard the song. I never heard the drum part. And again, I knew what didn't need to be there. And then just law of averages would lead you to what needed to be there. So
that's cool. So we started this talking about how you're a realtor. And I've spent an awesome amount of time so far, and we'll probably keep going a little bit with this, in music. And there's a lot of other things I know about you that I almost feel like I need to give you a wink to see if we're allowed to talk about it. Cool wine things that I know about, and spending time in your Airbnb that you've got, and all of these other things. We may go down that rabbit trail if you're willing, but at some point you're like, yeah, I'm not a blue man. Yeah, I'm not a studio touring musician anymore. I'm a realtor now. That's a reasonably massive pivot to at least an outsider. Maybe you see it as one and the same. I don't know. I guess the question is, what the hell happened?
Well, I think, again, it's a little hard to explain, but I never really have identified myself as, I know a lot of people, especially in the arts, that really identify as, Josh the guitar player, or Josh the filmmaker, or Rob the drummer, or Ian the guitar player. But that was never really entirely who I was. It's what I did. And I think if I've ever had a real gratitude or something that I just feel like I somehow has been instilled in me and I don't know where it's come from, is I've never been super attached to any kind of a title or because I think sometimes when you have that, you're afraid to shed it, or it can become self-limiting in a way. But I've always been, when I joined Blue Man, I was Rob the musician, but I was also, Rob the husband and Rob the father. And so whatever my role was in my career and in my life, as long as it furthered my cause as a good husband and a good father and a good role model and good son, good friend to my friends, then it didn't really matter that much what I did. And I think my transition from different roles in the music industry were pretty natural. That was more of at a younger age, where I was very ambitious, and I would always look to the next thing and what would be the next step, so I could just keep it fresh and not be. But there's just so much opportunity and so many things to do and so little time to do them all, that I was just excited to do it all. Blue Man was a really interesting opportunity for me because it allowed me to do what I love to do, but to not have to give up all the things that I had to give up when I was a touring musician. Being at home. I used to say it's like being on the road in the same town every night. You can go home to your own bed. You can go home to your wife. You can develop good relationships with your children. So for me, the transition from into Blue Man was probably one of the greatest gifts you could ever have as a musician if your values were what mine were. So that was an easy one for me. It was an easy one to say yes to. And a lot of people have asked me, do you ever wish that you had gone back, done One Republic, followed through? In hindsight, the band was an incredible success, and don't you wish you were a part of it? And I always say, well, I was a part of it. It was a big part of my life. I'm very proud of it, but I wouldn't change it for anything in the world, because I have everything I need, and I think it was a great decision. The transition from being a musician to being a realtor and to starting a real estate company felt really natural at the time, but it's taken me a while to really understand what exactly, how that really completely changed and how I left one behind and moved forward to the other. But ultimately, the answer to that is there's only so much time to do anything properly. You just can't do everything. And the same thing is with music. You just can't do everything that comes your way. You have to decide and focus, and if you're going to do it properly. But for me, moving to Orlando and realizing that I had this opportunity to stay in one place, which knew the show was going to be here a long time, and we had been moving around in a bubble with 30 people. We moved the show to Toronto. The Toronto show moved here. It was pretty much all the same people, and we really didn't need to assimilate into the community. But when I got a few years in, I started realizing that I really loved it here, and this was a place that we could stay. I'm very involved in our church, very involved in our community, things that I hadn't had for 25 years, really 20 plus years. And I realized that was really important. My family was the most important. My community outside of my work was really important. And I thought, we need to have something that ties us to the community, a way we can contribute, a way we can serve, and then something that can sustain me if I want to stay here and all of a sudden the show leaves, because now I'm not in New York City or Los Angeles, I'm in Orlando. And at that age, and coming from Vancouver and moving to a hot state, the last thing I wanted to be doing is playing drums at Animal Kingdom in a kangaroo suit or something like that. So,
there's definitely merit to not slamming drums in 100-degree heat in the direct sun. I know Disney's got these cool guys who play on trash cans. And it's Blue Man reminiscent in some ways, and they're the janitors, and they drive, they walk around. They're really cool guys, and they're super talented. And I swear they must lose 10 pounds a day. Yeah. I don't know how they put it all back on, or they disappear after a week or two. But those poor guys. That's not a career up. That's kind of a lateral. They clearly love it.
Yeah.
So a couple minutes ago, you were mentioning, if you got to put some real time and focus in if you're going to do something right.
Yeah.
And it seems like you have a certain, once you're in something, you've got a certain level of commitment to it that is breeding some pretty serious and notable success. I mean, you were clearly committed to music for as long as you were fully in. And for clarity's sake, I mean, you occasionally play some music, right?
Right.
Okay. It's not like you've forgotten how to play.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
No, so. I used to. Again, it's just there's not enough time to do everything, because I'd be here. Initially, the people I knew were in Los Angeles and New York and cities like that, and Vancouver, and that was just a lot of work to go back and keep doing those things. But I love playing music. I can. I'm happy to tell you the kinds of things that I do now that I enjoy more than ever. But yeah, it's just difficult to do everything.
Sure. So now you're focusing on real estate. And if I recall, and hopefully I'm not talking too out of turn, was last year like 86 transactions that you did? It was something big.
Yeah.
That's a lot of transactions.
Yeah, almost 100 transactions.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you had your office, and you've got two other people?
Yep. I have Laura Johnson, who's been working with me for 10 years now, and I work with Jamie. Also, Jamie works with me.
Yeah, Jamie
so it's
Tomaso.
really the three of us.
Right. So 3 people. Even if you're just split that evenly, it's 33 transactions a person or so, if we're talking about 100 roughly. And that seems very busy. Now, we know so many realtors locally, and it's my imagination that there's a lot of them who are able to survive on maybe 1 to 2 transactions a month if they're lucky. There's a lot of them out there doing onesie twosies, and it's kind of their side hustle. And I'm not focused in my mind right now on them, but there's reasonably happy people doing just a couple a month.
Right.
Your office, with only a couple of people, seems to be hitting a lot of home runs. And I will say firsthand, I mean, you were my realtor on my last transaction. Working miracles, pulling rabbits out of hats, and my wife and I are beyond thrilled with not only just your level of customer service and care, but also just, the final transaction. The payout was remarkable. And so everybody's happy, including the buyers, who I've heard through the grapevine through some neighbors, they all also are happy. So everybody's happy. I like that. And it sounds like that's kind of your MO, that, these transactions are all going swimmingly well. Even any hurdle that could be considered a challenge is met with optimism, and you're fixing all of the things that could be broken to make it wonderful in the end. And you're doing 100 of them, which is kind of mind-boggling. How do you, again, I'm stuck on this, because how do you go from successful musician to gloriously successful realtor doing a big business with a small team? Where is that? Is there a connection to your personality as a drummer, in your personality as a realtor? And where does this level of success come from in your estimation? I know there's 16 questions all wrapped up into there too. So good luck unpacking that.
Well, I will say, I know it might seem odd to hear me say this again, but I know they're all different jobs, and everything seems very different, but it seems really similar to me. It seems like I still kind of do the same thing, as far as it all involves the same skill set for me. I just feel like I just transitioned to different arenas. Really.
Okay, what's that skill set?
For example, moving from music to real estate was actually very similar to me. The actions that I would take, it's all about relationships. It's about interpersonal skills. It's about sensitivity to what people need. And
so this is the business of music.
Right.
So managing a career in music has that similarity to what you're doing now.
Absolutely. Like I said, it doesn't matter with anything that I've done. If you're not bringing value to the table, then you have nothing to offer. So finding that need, and then filling that need, and then assembling a team that can support you the best way possible to fill that need. And if your focus is always outward like that, if it's always about the other people, it's easier to do in real estate, because it's very obvious, like, you're my client, I need to take care of you, I'm selling your house. It's a lot more ambiguous in music, but it's still the same thing. If you can really find that, if you can focus on how you can help other people, how you can make their experience more pleasurable, if you can be a pleasure to be around, and if you can always further their cause, then your cause is going to be furthered. And in music, in real estate, I found it easier to identify the needs and the voids. And again, just like with anything that I've done before, the bigger picture for me was the community, and real estate just happened to be the avenue that I found, because I had that skill set as a child, and I remembered how it was done. I thought, well, that's easy enough, because I can model, what my family did, because I grew up in a family that was involved in real estate. So I felt my insecurities were a lot less than other fields that I thought about, just because I had a familiarity with it. But as far as success goes, I would say Well, I will say one thing. I work harder than most people I know at what I do usually. I usually put more time into it. And I think that's a valuable thing to share, because I think sometimes we're too modest to admit that we actually do that. And other people that get into music, or they get into the music business or business, they don't really realize how much time and focus you put in. But I would say with anything, whether I was 17 in my first band, whether I moved to Los Angeles and wanted to play on records that other people had already sewn that up 30 years ago, or I wanted to be on MTV, or I wanted to be, whatever it was, I did it with an obsessive focus on what I was doing. And when I got into the real estate business, I realized the opportunity, and I got so excited about doing it and making that transition that I was obsessively focused on it. So I think that's a big part of it, is you just work really hard and then work smart and ask a lot of questions. And I think that's a big part of it. And then the interpersonal skills of just, enjoying getting to know people, enjoying networking. And then both careers have a very similar, one of the similarities is that you always have to look to the future while you're busy in the present. So, as a touring musician, it's very difficult when you're in Los Angeles. It's easy to network with people and get your next job or your next gig. Mm-hmm. But when you're on tour and you're in Rochester, and then it's hard to stay in touch with everybody, especially at a time where, your cell phone was this big and there was no internet. So that was a skill I learned. It was easy when I got into real estate. I'm like, well, here's my database, here's my systems, here's the internet, here's lists of all the people in here. That was I got excited about that. I thought, well, I've been doing this my whole life, and now I basically have a menu of everything I need to do. I just need to do it. And again, it was just, doing it with focus.
Yeah, that resonates. I think most entrepreneurs of any level find themselves working the 50, 60, 70, 80-hour work weeks. I find it fascinating that, you were a musician moving to this, and you brought the same level of passion from one to the other, because I think you were right that a lot of people get wrapped up in identities, mm-hmm. and that can be wildly limiting. But it's just so interesting that you can draw that networking connection between the two of them, and that there's really, in, I guess, business success in general, music was a business, and this is a business, and I had never seen it. I actually, even though I think it intellectually makes a ton of sense right now, I've always actually been a little mystified at your career journey.
Right. Because
it doesn't make sense at that 50,000-foot view level that somebody with a nearly 1% experience, if you feel me on what I mean by that in the music world, shifting over to something that for a lot of people seems almost pedestrian. We joke here in Florida, if you're listening from out of the area, we joke here in Florida that when you cross the Florida-Georgia line and then you change your driver's license over, within 3 days you also get issued your real estate license. And there's just so many realtors here. And so many of them, truth be told, are either inactive or not doing a very good job. And then there's a whole bunch of people who are working really hard and doing a great job, and kudos to all of them. But not too many are Rob Kurzreiters. Not too many of them hit your transaction throughput. Not too many of them have your reputation. And so to go from 1% to 1%, in my estimation, is absolutely remarkable. And so in my mind then, I mean, it's very illuminating to think business to business, not music to real estate, but business to business.
Right.
Does that seem right? Is that what you're telling us that you did?
Yeah, and those are very kind words, Josh. Thanks.
Oh, well, you know I'm a Rob fan. I always have been.
But I really, honestly, I think it's just, and it's really hard not to talk in cliches, because I don't even like using the word networking or focusing on the why. We hear that all the time.
Oh, thanks, Simon Sinek.
But it is true. It's really like, if you really look at it and think about, like, if you don't have the motivation and you don't have the skill, then you're not going to go anywhere. So if you develop the skill, you have to be good at what you do. But that can be learned. But caring about people, caring about the outcome, going back to being a bridge builder and a unified, if you want to be somebody that is liked in your community, if that's your motivation, that you're going to stay here and you want to be somebody that, people enjoy being around, and your family has a place in that community that is a good place, and that is a why. And it's the same thing in music. And so I guess it's a cliche, but that's been my motivation. And when I really believe that I can get to something like that, I'll work tirelessly to get there. And I think that putting in the time, I know a lot more now than I did 10 years ago in real estate.
Oh, sure.
And I think another thing that I've always joked about to my wife and close friends is that I never really know what I don't know. And that's a real benefit. Because sometimes if you are at a 12-year point of your career and you look back at having gotten started, if you would have known then what you knew now, you probably never would have succeeded. Because when you start something new, it's like music or anything that you start, you think the top of the mountain's after that first switchback, or maybe it's the second, and it's maybe the third, but you don't realize there's 60 of them. And if you did, you probably never would have started climbing. So I think a little bit of ignorance and naivety has always been something that has been on my side. I've always had a bit of a Bobby Brightside outlook on things. I'll just put in the time and it'll be great. But then and that's why I had to kind of step back and just go, you know what, it's a lot of work. It really is a lot of work, because it's easy to say, I just knew it was going to happen or believed it was going to happen, put in the time, and I made it happen. But I think part of that is a little bit of naivety and enthusiasm. So if you can find something that you're passionate about and get behind it. But I think the why is the biggest thing.
Well, I think you also, though I wouldn't call you in the same way that people accuse me of being overconfident, you don't exude my stupidity of overconfidence. You're just confident. And I think some of that naivety, if it comes with confidence that, a challenge can be accepted and overcome, that seems to make sense to me. But if you didn't believe in yourself with that naivety, you also would have stopped.
Right.
It's the idea that, you're pretty sure you know what you're doing and you can go ahead and give it a try. But if you find out something isn't quite what you estimated, it's a problem that can be solved. It's a hurdle that can be, jumped over and overcome. Nothing's going to stop you in particular.
Right.
Yeah. And that's also maybe outlook too. I mean, it seems like the glass is pretty half full for you. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it pretty much has to be just to keep a good mindset, I think. But have a great wife. I have great kids. I've felt very blessed in my life. I've had, just like everybody, I've had challenges and adversities, but that's part of the journey.
Yeah.
And
has there been any, because, it's funny, we're so positive when you and I are always talking, that challenges and adversities, I suppose we've talked about some real estate transactions that we've become aware of where you're like, oh yeah, I got through this because, but I mean, when it comes to personal career trajectory and the steps towards growth, has there been one story in there where it's like, oh, I didn't know if I was going to make it, or I was going to tap out, or anything like that?
I've never really had those kind of challenges with what I did. Mm-hmm. It's more where I was in life. Is this really the trajectory I want to be on? Very points of self-reflection and examination, and just because I think a lot of times when you push through things and you focus on things and you have goals and you're focused on achieving those goals, whether they're relational, career, spiritual, whatever they are, sometimes you find yourself in places that maybe you didn't put yourself. And I think there definitely have been times in my life where I have felt, how did I end up here? Is this where I'm supposed to be? Is this where God wants me? Is this where I want me? Is this where Joyce wants me? So those have been more challenging. You know, I've been very close to my family. I'm a homebody. I do not like being away from home. I don't.
Which is weird for a realtor and a musician, to be perfectly
Yeah.
honest. I mean,
Yeah.
you're kind of the counter personality to both industries.
Yeah. And it's one of the reasons when I was a touring musician that I wanted to be a studio musician. And it's one of the reasons when I was a studio musician and because you always have to juggle a lot of balls. When Blue Man came up, I thought this is perfect. This is like the white picket fence tour. So, and the same thing with, and it's very, very similar to how I felt when I got to Orlando. I needed a home. We needed a home. We're going to stay here. We need a home that's more than these 30 people that were around. And I could use a mountain and some forests. And that's how come we've got our place in North Carolina. So it's always been a little bit of that. I've always been pretty far away from the comforts of what I would call home. And I would say probably my biggest motivation in Orlando, being the last place in the world that I would put myself at the time, I felt like we have been able to make it home through that motivation. And I probably will never leave.
Oh, that's good to know. We want you around, for sure.
So, yeah.
It's awesome. I feel like this is one of those episodes where somebody's going to have to listen twice, at least, to unpack all of the lessons that we can draw from your life. You know, the humility of being willing to shift from one player position to another, you know, the longevity of your careers being, you know, so much time that you put in, and, you know, a lot of your attention to other people and the needs of the situation seems to be very actionable for, you know, anybody who wants to succeed in business. So,
sure.
You know, I think we should all be students of the Kurzreiter way. That'll be the name of your book, I think.
Very, very kind.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, one of the things that I've been very fortunate to have is certain people around me in my life at just the right time.
Well, how do you find that?
Well, I think sometimes it's just, you know, I don't like to use the word lucky, but I do feel like sometimes I have been pretty lucky.
Well, you know, Thomas Jefferson said about that. The harder I work, the luckier I get.
Right. I do know that through every major challenge in my life, I prayed my way through it. I've really taken the time to think about it and tried to make good decisions. But I've always had some real reassurance in those decisions. So it sounds like leaps of faith that we've been talking about with different
They certainly
things.
do.
But I've never really made what I would call a true leap of faith. And maybe maybe it sounds a little like I'm being modest with that, but I feel like it is true, because whenever I would change fields within my previous career or changing from Blue Man into a real estate career, I've always been able to identify a few people that I knew that I could learn from, or that I knew I could count on, or there was always a bit of a safety net, always felt. And I think that's really important. I don't think you can understate the impact of others that you surround yourself with. I think that's probably one of the things that I did when I was really young that was a little bit I wasn't conscious of, but when I look back, I saw that I was always kind of doing that, almost like a self-preservation step. But
so are we talking about mentors then? People who can guide you because they've already been there?
People that were in the end, you know, I would think about making a step in this direction, and then I wouldn't make that step until I realized, well, I actually know some people now that I can count on, some people that have a lot of knowledge that will either mentor me or who have done it already and know a lot more than I do, that seem to be people that are willing to share and learn and help me with that. So I felt that way a lot in real estate. I talked to a few people. I think a really good example is, you know, in real estate, before I decided to get into it, I probably talked to everybody I could find that I knew had a real estate license or had an aunt that had it. And I just spent a lot of time talking to these people, and I got a comfort level with it. And I had a temperature check of the water to know I could jump in and be okay. And the same thing was, shifting into the studio musician world in California and meeting with everyone that I knew that was involved in producing records and playing on records and that type of thing, to see if again, a temperature check to see if is this something that could be done, and really investigating that. And of course, when you're in that process of doing that, you're going to have more than half the people tell you it can't be done. And I think that's where your attitude comes in, because sometimes for me that just didn't weigh in as much as it can be done.
Yeah, so I don't think we share in this personality type where if I hear it can't be done, I go, want to bet? Right. It doesn't sound like you're that guy.
No, I just don't really pay as much attention to those people. I keep going I like to know that it can be done.
Okay.
I just need to keep going until I find more people telling me it can be done.
Got it. That makes sense. Well, and all of that, I mean, all that research and all of that time that you put in sounds like work. And it sounds like it's still your level of commitment to yourself, your family, your career, all of that is well spent time to assure that shift from wherever you are to wherever you might go has some level of clarity and assurance. And once again, that's back to time in the trenches doing the thing.
Sure.
Yeah. Makes a heck of a lot of sense.
And there's just not enough time to do everything. I would just love if there was, but there isn't. And that's a big reason why it's very difficult to play music and aside from just enjoying playing music and playing it. And it's the same reason why I found it very difficult to be involved in one facet of music and do another as well. So I've always been very compartmentalized in that way because of the amount of focus I think it takes to do one thing properly. You don't know a lot of centers that are also great goalies.
Ain't it true?
But they all love hockey. So
that makes a heck of a lot of sense. Well, thank you, Rob. This is one of those episodes where people are going to have to read the transcript too. I already see that coming. This is good stuff, and I appreciate you being so open with the wisdom that you're sharing.
Absolutely. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate you.
I appreciate you too, brother. All right, well, I'm Josh Pies. This has been the Bootstrapped Unicorns podcast. This is our very first interview, actually, so I went with a safe person, somebody I knew I could have a great conversation with, and a dear friend. And so if you enjoyed this and you got something out of it, I want to ask a couple of things of you right now. One, go subscribe, whatever platform you're on, go make sure that you're connected with us long term. And on top of all that, if you would, drop us a message. I'd like to know how Rob's information and wisdom here has maybe affected you. If you've got questions, I have an easy direct pipeline to Rob. I'll relay those. He also has social media, and that's all going to be tagged and stuff as well. So you're welcome to go find Rob. Why don't you buy a house? Orlando's a great place. The whole world's moving here, so it's a little bit of a fight, but I've never met a better real estate fighter than Rob Kurzreiter. So you go ahead and find my friend here, and he'll help you find a home. And with that, the next episode should be a great one. We're going to have John Tankersley, also a friend that you've name dropped. I figured I'm going to start with some really amazing storytellers who have great stories to tell and really actionable stuff. So the next episode that's going to drop is episode 5, John Tankersley. And we'll see you on the next episode.